and welcome back to episode 70 of Inside the Vault, a Carolina Panthers podcast. I am your host, Ryan Smith, and tonight with me, I've got someone from the special teams world, someone who's been teaching kicking and punting for over 20 years, Dan Orner, kicking in Charlotte, North Carolina, punters ages 12 through the NFL. You can find him here on Twitter at Dan Orner Kicking. Let's welcome to Inside the Vault, Dan Orner. Dan, how's it going?
Great. Thank you guys for thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
It's such a pleasure to have you on, Dan. And it's this time of year, a team like the Panthers is undergoing quite a special teams transition, specifically in kicking and punting. And got your name through a article in the Athletic, and I wanted to just kind of pick your brain, have you on. So we'll start with the Panthers. Specific new kicker and punter Sam Martin from coming over for the Buffalo Bills, and then Ryan Fitzgerald, undrafted free agent from Florida State, who it looks like is the Panthers' primary competition with journeyman Matthew Wright, who the Panthers signed earlier this offseason.
Yep.
Let's start with Sam Martin because he's the punter, and I mentioned him first. Panthers move on from Johnny Hecker, goes to Tennessee. Both of Sam and Johnny have been in the league, obviously, for a while. But you have trained with Sam, and what is the Carolinas and the Panthers getting in a guy like Sam Martin, local kid who went to App State for college, and now obviously has been doing it in the NFL for quite a while.
It's a unique it's a unique opportunity for him. He started obviously in the Carolinas being a really a great cold weather punter at Appalachian State. He was also early in his career probably the top kickoff guy in the NFL. And um, you know, he trained basically all pre-draft when he got drafted in the fifth round, everything in Charlotte.
Yeah,
And almost 13 years to the day, there's a local field that the Panthers have donated, and it popped up on my timeline probably about 2 weeks after Sam signed with the Panthers. And I was like, man, what irony to come back to the Carolinas. His sister lives down the road. I'm here. He's here every off season, and he's always joked around like, oh man, I'd love to come back to Charlotte. And so for me as a coach, basically he's my first NFL guy that I ever had. For him to come to be obviously close with me, he's a great friend of mine. And to be here in the Carolinas is just for me, it's extremely special, and be able to see more games and stuff like that of him versus getting up to Buffalo. But I think, if you look at his career, he has been an absolute weapon when it comes to directional punting. If you look at some of the analytics, he is one of the top directional right punters in the NFL. Um, and, historically just been an absolute weapon in extreme weather, whether it be blizzards in Philadelphia or conditions in Green Bay. And then obviously, what I think a lot of folks don't realize is the hidden numbers from punting in the last 2 years in Buffalo. Really, if you can make it in Buffalo, you can kind of make it anywhere, just because of the amount of wind and how it affects not only the ball in the air, from multitudes, but also how it affects the drop. And I think, him coming to the Carolinas, um, while we still have some windy days and some bipolar Carolina weather,
absolutely.
I think you're getting a really good, a guy that can flip the field, a guy that has a great pitching wedge, balls that land inside the five, inside the 10. He's done an exceptional job over his career. Um, just being a really good directional punter, and that's the way the NFL was gone, and is going.
Yeah. And yeah, as a host, bad job by me not kind of starting with your kind of history there. Dan Orner kicking and punting, ages 12 through the NFL. Um, how did you get involved? Obviously, doing this. Obviously, you played yourself, but what drove you to do coaching and training, and how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I did play. I actually went to Michigan State out of high school, and the coach that was there at the time was a guy named Nick Saban.
Yeah,
And
I think we've heard of him.
yeah, there and the staff there was just just unbelievable. I mean, the graduate assistants were Josh McDaniel and future head coaches that we just didn't even know about as players. And
Yeah.
I do think, being around guys like that, really intense guys, kind of molded me early on. And um, I ended up transferred to Chapel Hill and played my last 3 years there. And then I was joke around. I did a cup of coffee in the NFL. I was, kind of a practice squad player for a year with the Vikings, and then got done and got into the financial world. I was a broker at Wells Fargo for 15 years. And while I was at Wells Fargo, I really did have a void and wanted to be around football. So I started, working with a couple kids on nights and weekends. And one guy turned into two guys turned into 10. And then what happened was I was training a guy that replaced me at Carolina by the name of Connor Barth, who played 10
Yep.
years in the NFL.
Yeah.
And Connor's dad, who was a professor here at UNC Charlotte, and just retired, he's the one that kind of grabbed me and was like, "Hey, you're gifted at communication. You relate with these kids." And he basically was kind of saying like the way you see things, you're able to help kids and from a form standpoint. So I would say um, what my specialty is form focused training. I really prefer to be kind of a mechanic and get to work on some high priced foreign cars, as I joke around with all the time. But I really started working with kids on nights and weekends, so I was really kind of doing both things. And then what happened is my passion just grew so much. I was in a position before COVID where I was able to sell my business, and kind of exit out of um, the broker space and kind of get into kicking full time. But for about 10 or 15 years, I was working 7 days a week and on the fields, um, and just really developing guys and having I didn't have I just had kids, so for me, a lot of these guys were my kids. They
Yeah.
were an extension of my family. Guys like Sam, I was helping them with gas money to get to Charlotte from App so that they could come down and train. And so, these guys were really an extension of my family. And I just poured everything I had into them. I feel like sometimes, as a coach, you're kind of like a farmer. You're planting seeds that, potentially could grow to redwoods, 10, 12 years from now. So, um, that's really my path is, now 20 years later, we have about 10 guys in the NFL and we have 70 guys in college. And, it's wild that we pretty much control half of the fourth downs in college football, on any given Saturday and a third in the NFL. So,
Yeah.
um, um,
Who
that's
are some of those guys, just for the listeners who may not be as familiar? We'll just do since 10's a lot shorter than 70. So name some of the clients in the NFL that you have for that people may recognize.
so I have Josh Cordy, who's the kicker for the Rams, the kicker and the punter for the Falcons, Young
Yep.
Hoku,
Yeah, Mike, yeah.
Yep, and Bradley Pinion, Matt Gay, who plays for the Commanders, Joey Sly, for the
Another former
Titans.
Panther kicker right there. Yep, Joey
Yep,
Slott.
and then I work with Johnny Hecker as well, um, who's now with the Titans, and I have a couple guys that are free agents, and obviously Ryan Fitzgerald,
Yep.
now with the Panthers as well. So, those are the guys. There's two other guys that are free agents that are probably going to get picked up here in the next week or so. But
Awesome.
those are the guys that I work with that are active guys here in the NFL.
Yeah. So, how do I frame this? What for Panther fans who are going to listen to this episode, since this is a Panthers podcast, and they're thinking, okay, he trains Johnny Hecker, he also trains Sam Martin. What is the difference between, stylistically speaking, between Johnny Hecker and Sam Martin that fans might notice this season?
Yeah, I think they're definitely two different guys. Johnny's a taller guy. He's 6'5", has a long lever. Sam, He's right around 6 foot, and he's a little bit has more of what we call more of a fast twitch type swing. So really fast leg whip. Johnny kind of relies on his long lever to kind of flip the field, and then also too, Johnny has had, he really, in terms of being a journeyman, has honestly reshaped the NFL with a lot of the misdirection punting that he did when he was
with
with
the
the
Ram.
Rams.
Yep.
Yeah, and in fact, in the industry, we call it the hecker ball, a ball that you kind of go one direction or able to kind of slice it the other direction. So, Johnny had a lot of tricks in his bag and still does in his bag. Um, and
Yeah, Panthers have
um,
seen some of those trick punter quarterback plays over the years and other things. Yeah.
And Sam's a little bit more of a surgeon. If you're like, hey, I want the ball within 5 yards of the right sideline, he has that type of control. He has that. He could flip the field 55, 60 yards and put it right on a dime and stop it. So really, the difference is Sam has just made his career on being just an excellent situational, knows exactly where to put the ball. He just from a directional standpoint, he's just absolutely gifted. So it's just definitely two different styles.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we'll switch over to kicking here. Eddie Pinheiro was the Panthers kicker last few years, and they decided to go in a different direction there. Joey Sly, who you mentioned, is obviously kicking still in the league. He was journeyman in the NFL. Panthers, one of his stops. Obviously, didn't work out in Carolina, but he did have some good moments here in Carolina. And then obviously the Panthers have had a lot of kickers kind of in between those two guys as well over the years. And then, ironically, a guy named Ryan Fitzgerald signed as a drafted free agent from Florida State University, and he's going to be competing with Matthew Wright of the Carolina Panthers, journeyman that they signed this offseason as well. So when the Panthers got Ryan Fitzgerald as an undrafted free agent, I went and looked at his numbers, did some digging, and just watched some Florida State film. And this guy's leg is a weapon. It is an absolute arsenal, in my opinion. Talk to Panther fans about what they can expect if Ryan Fitzgerald, ends up winning this job and does become the Panthers kicker for this coming season. Um, what can fans expect from a guy who, let's be honest, didn't miss in college last year? And I think I read this right. He said he changed his form after the initial season where he missed a lot of kicks, didn't like it, and then he switched and then he went back to the original form, and he's been kind of money ever since. So talk to us about what the Panthers are getting in Ryan Fitzgerald.
Yeah, so I met Ryan after his sophomore season when basically he kind of he was in a tough spot. He had a lot of people that were pulling on him his sophomore season to, and these are notable players, notable Florida State guys that were kind of pulling on him to kind of change his form, you know, almost kind of the reason why I got into coaching. There's a lot of guys that try to change players to be them instead of what's best for actually the player and their style. So, Ryan went through some of those growing pains his sophomore season. And I met him basically we started working after that season and really kind of laid a blueprint for his last 2 years to basically only miss, I think, one or two kicks. Obviously last year he was perfect. But basically what you're getting, a veteran set kid, almost like a Robbie Gould, who was a
Yeah.
15-year player. You're getting that mindset, that maturity level is just his maturity for where he's at in his career is just awesome. How he handles his day to day. He has for the last 2 years acted like a pro in terms of managing his reps. That's a tough thing to do with college guys because a lot of these college guys are kickaholics, and Ryan really sat down, created a blueprint, a game plan, and just has some awesome pillars for success. So that he stuck by for the last 2 years. And, you're basically getting the accuracy of someone like Robbie Gould with a bigger leg. And, you're basically, if you can get the ball now to to the 40-yard line, you got someone that could stroke her from 57, 58, 59, which is something that, honestly, I do think the Panthers need. So, obviously Eddie has been money. He's probably one of the most accurate guys in the NFL. And when he first got in the NFL, he was a big leg guy. And when he was at Florida, he was a big leg guy. And, I think that early on in the process, when teams are working Ryan out, that was one of the things that a lot of teams tested him in private workouts. I think with the Ravens, I think he kicked like 27 or 28 field goals over 50 yards in the workout. They
Mm.
wanted to see that he was capable of hitting that amount of kicks. And, that's just the way the NFL is going. You look at the analytics, there's a lot more kicks, 50 plus in the last year or last 2 years compared to other years. I don't know if that means that the offenses are getting worse or the defenses are getting better, but
Yeah.
for kickers, I mean it's a great story, that guys have wanted to for years been called upon to hit 55, 60-yard field goals. And it's a positive story on how the NFL is going. But I think the biggest thing you're getting with Ryan is just the maturity level of, a 15-year vet, just how he handles himself day to day, his mindset. And then too, having someone like Sam Martin, who's, it's an awesome recipe for success to have someone that's a 13-year vet that teaches an absolute weapon. This is how you are a pro, and this is the changes that you go through. The stuff that David Akers taught Sam Martin when he was drafted to the Lions. So my hat's off to the Panthers for bringing in someone that not only is a vet themselves, but bringing in a young guy that they're going, hey, this guy's the future, and we think he could be, another John Casey or one of these players of the decades.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because it seemed in a lot of Panther fans, or guys like myself who were both content creators and fans, it seemed as if, yeah, last year you mentioned the whole 50 yards and above. It seemed like, with Eddie, they only tried 50 yards about two or three times throughout the year, and that was it. And so the first thing I saw with Ryan is his 59 yarder in the season opener this past year, and so that let me know, okay, he can kick it from about 55 and up. At least in that one kick he made it, and like you said, kind of leading to that workout with the Panthers, which they wanted to see, the volume of kicks and the distances and everything such as that. So,
Yep.
um, that's really good to hear. And I think another thing that doesn't really get talked about when it comes to special teams, besides the kicking, is the punting, is the kickoff. Because with the 40-yard line, the 30-yard line, the different rules that are now being in place. Well, let me back up.
No,
Yeah.
I think you're spot on. The game is changing, and as coaches and players, we're having to adapt and evolve. And it's impossible to ignore. Hey, you know what? You have maybe an 85% field goal kicker, but you have a guy that can do some specialty kicks on kickoff. Because if the ball goes in the end zone, it's coming out to the 40. I mean, the guys in the top know the analytics. If we have the ball, we start on the 40, we're coming away with points.
Yeah.
So, guys like Ryan and guys that I have right now in the league, we're working on a bag of tricks for kickoff. Balls that you can't replicate in a jugs machine. So all of the private workouts that he had, we have a multitude of different type of kickoffs that we can do to the right, to the left, spin. That can, it's basically like now becoming a true trick shot golfer. Especially from a kickoff standpoint, the ball's got to get inside the 20. And if that ball gets on the ground, they have to field it. So if you can have balls that check and run different directions, you could really end up being a true weapon on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, at least for punting, I'm going back to punting for a second. over the years, I've never, I mean, I know I didn't play in the NFL, obviously, and I didn't play football, so, but I've studied it. So for fans who may not be as familiar, when it comes to out kicking your coverage with punting, because you feel like, some people it's all about hang time, and so for some people it's like, well, if they get it down, if they kick it a greater distance, that can kind of help, the gunners, kind of get back there. But if the hang time's not very good, you're gonna out kick your coverage, and there's no way anyone down there to kind of help you during the return game. So what makes a and then you mentioned the whole directional punting, versus the Australian type punting. You have the non-Australian type punting. So, what makes a good punter successful? I guess in whether it's college or the NFL. What makes a good punter successful?
Well, the game the game has kind of changed, and guys have tried to push the envelope, but it really does come back to, the journeymen in the 90s and early 2000s, um, you know, um, that were great coffin corner punters. Obviously in the last 15 years, the reverse spin balls, the Australians, you can't deny they have pushed the game forward and made it better, with a lot of the touch punts. The Americans obviously have picked that up, but the Australians definitely have pushed the envelope and made the game better from a punting standpoint, just because of some of the specialty punts that they've brought. And so, guys like Hecker and guys like, Sam, the biggest thing that folks have to understand is that, in terms of priority, it goes hang time is probably 1A, 1B is direction, and then distance. And direction really, you get graded out by having the ball. The better the better the closer the ball is to the sideline, the better, because every time there's a punt, there is a call. They're going to directionally, depending on what the gunners do, depending on where they are in the field, how the wind is, there's going to be a call of, hey, we want this ball directional right, directional left. We want this type of spin. We want to put the ball exactly here. Now, probably in the last 5 years, some coaches have tried to push the envelope and just said, you know what, we're going to kick the ball as long as we can, as far as we can down the middle of the field. We're just going to cover it. Well, unfortunately, in the NFL, the special teams coaches are just they can adapt so quick and make changes and
I was
play.
gonna say, like, take a kick returner who's really good, or a punt returner. I For years I sat in the stand saying, why don't they just kick it out of bounds? The guy is there and he's dangerous with the ball in his hands. Why are you kicking it to them? So what do you have to say, regarding something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, as a punter, like, our job is to put the ball as close to the sideline, if not out of bounds, as possible. Most of the guys know the returners line up at 40 or 45 yards, and um, they're trying to get the ball. The punters, just like the returners, are obviously selfish about their average and hang time, so
Right, yeah.
they want to try to squeeze out a couple extra yards, which is why you don't see guys just kind of hitting piss missiles right out of bounds at 45 yards. Guys are trying to sneak out 5, 6 extra yards so they could be, Pro Bowl punters themselves. But I mean, you bring up a good point. If you know where 45 yards is and you could hit the ball out of bounds every time, I just don't think it's as easy as we say.
Of
Just
course,
because,
nothing is. Yeah.
it's definitely it's a balance, because if you aim too much, then you're kind of trying to place the ball. And I think a lot of these guys want to be able to free swing and go, you know what, I do have a 5 yard buffer. So, guys like Sam have 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 made their career on just being, guys that can, he could be on the left hash and punt all the way across to the right and put the ball within a 5 yard radius. Now, what that does for coverage guys is, now they're not running down the field kind of trying to dodge someone trying to take their head off and trying to locate the ball. Now they have complete knowledge of where the ball is going to be, and it allows these guys to really be more dangerous, because if you talk to most return guys, most of the guys, as soon as they see a really good spiral, they're not looking at the ball. They're looking at, all right, where are my holes? Where's the coverage? And at the last second, then they're looking up to catch the ball, which is why you see guys drop the ball in the NFL. And you're like, how does this return guy drop it? Well, a lot of times those guys are trying to be 3 steps ahead and find holes and catch the ball at the same time, similar to like a major league center fielder
Yeah.
that's watching the guy at third base, and he's also watching that ball, coming down. He's seeing if the guy's going to tag on him, so he has to throw at home plate.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Dan Orner has been my guest today here on Inside the Vault Carolina Panthers podcast. As we're kind of previewing special teams here in the month of May as we get to the kind of the slow time here of the NFL calendar. Dan, 3 more for you as I get you out the door here. Let's talk about the yips and kind of when kickers and punters you just you call it the yips. What is the process when it comes to a kicker or a punter who is struggling? You see all the time. The kickers and punters will say, half of it's mental or most of it's mental, honestly. What is your opinion on that stance? And if a guy really is struggling, yips or otherwise, how do you get him out of it?
I think you obviously, for someone like myself, it's impossible not to have. I wish I could say that this didn't happen in my career where I didn't have a player that struggled. But if you're going to be in this business, that you're going to and you're successful in this business, you're going to have players that miss game winners and get death threats, and their social media blows up. I mean, unfortunately, it's just part of the business. And the first thing I try to do is always my ultimate goal is if you get their confidence back and you get them making kicks, they're going to be fine. And the ultimate thing you don't want as a coach is you don't want your player kicking not to miss, like trying to guide the ball, trying to place the ball. You still want to be able to be kind of like a free swinger, similar to the guys you see at the PGA Championship on the first tee versus tightening up if they're in a playoff round or something like that. But I think the first thing is identifying, all right, one, why are you missing? Is this a technical thing that we could fix real quick? If it is, yes. And sometimes it's a quick fix. Sometimes it's just changing one tire on the car.
Yeah.
But sometimes, that the engine is blown where guys are, they're overthinking. And I think, the ultimate thing for me as a coach is to try to get guys to think less, to, if you're thinking about more than 2 things, you definitely get paralyzed in the brain. And, fortunately for me with the guys I work with, we really try to stick to our pillars for success and fall back on things. And, sometimes it's as simple as getting back to basics, like a golfer just, all right, you know what? I'm going to grab my pitching wedge and hit 30 balls. And sometimes it's simple as getting back to having fun. They were stressing too much, but most of the time it's a technical thing. I mean, sometimes it's a holder. I've been brought into NFL teams before where they had really accurate guys, and I was put on a spotlight and was like, why is my guy missing? And I'm like, have you guys looked at the holder? The holder missed the spot. He
Real
also
quickly,
missed.
go ahead and for those who just may not know, laces out versus laces in. What is the difference, real quick?
Honestly, if the ball is leaned properly and you kick the laces, if it's 30 degrees, you're going to feel the laces on your foot. But the reality is it's better to have the ball spotted correctly and angled correctly. If you kick the laces, it's not going to really 100% affect the kick, maybe a yard, maybe something like that.
Okay.
But the real problem occurs worse than laces if the holder is spinning the ball, meaning he spins it off your foot. It's almost like
that's right. I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just a lot to this that go into it that sometimes, unfortunately as a kicker, you can't be like, hey, you missed the spot and you missed the angle. I'm sure y'all watched the game where a kicker put his hands on his thighs and he missed the entire net.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody goes, oh my God, I can't believe this guy in the NFL. Sometimes it's not the kicker, it's the holder, but he can't point his fingers on that. Fortunately for the Panthers, Sam Martin has held for multiple Pro Bowl guys. and is an absolute. We joke around sometimes. He's like a DJ back there. He can just spin balls so fast, and he's so good. He can rotations. He can catch the ball and manipulate it as he's going down to the ground, so he does not have to spin the ball. He can catch one handed and hold. So, for someone like Ryan going into that situation, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is super fast. I see the ball a lot longer as compared. And, he's already made comments to me like, holy cow, I see the ball so much better than I did in college. And, having a vet like obviously someone like JJ, you know, that snaps laces 19 and a half out of 20 times perfect, it makes Sam's job easy. And Ryan's back there, you know, all he has to think about is his swing versus like, all right, is the hole going to be there and so forth. So
Yeah.
you just got for a rookie kicker, you're you're making his life great because you got a veteran snapper that's near perfect, and you got such a good holder, and you got guys that are going to make you confident, which is huge.
That is music to a lot of Panthers fans here ears with the kicking game and just overall the last few years in the special teams era. Um, Last two to get you out of here. Where is the future of the league going, or college? You can speak on either or both. When it comes to kicking and the punting, is it going to be the kind of everything evolves as we know things aren't the same over time, but there's a little changes here or there. But where do you see the kicking and the punting and special teams going in the NFL in the next, let's say, 10 to 20 years, per se?
I think you're going to see, especially this year. Now teams are getting to work in the game balls, in advance, significantly in advance. Historically, you got the balls like an hour and a half, 2 hours before the game, and if you had a really good ball boy that had some elbow grease, he could break them in for you pretty good. But now they're getting the balls. I think you're going to see a 70-yarder. You're going to see a 70-yarder definitely in field goals this year. Guys were scratching the surface last year with some really long balls, but I think in the right situation with wind, especially on kicking, now that they're going to get broken in footballs, I think you're going to see guys break records punting wise as well. You're going to see guys hitting longer, better hang time balls. I mean, that just smoother balls travel through the wind better. Any kicker or punter that gets a broken in ball that, so to speak, as we would call a juicer, that beautiful peach that you get, if you get a great ball, the confidence level will be through the roof. So I think you're going to see guys break records this year. I think records are going to be shattered from a field goal standpoint, and same thing from a punting standpoint. Hang time, on average, the hang time, the guy that won the Pro Bowl, the average was 4.6. I think you're going to see guys hitting consistent balls close to 5 now that they have really broken in almost used footballs. And it's interesting because in years past they complained because kickers were breaking records, and so they would give guys fresh out of the bag, and guys struggle for a year or two. I mean, it's a significant difference, not just mentally, but just how they travel in the air. So I think the game is without a doubt changing. In college, there is a lot more rollout punting. There's a lot more balls that get on the ground. I just think the schemes in the NFL are too advanced for that. The Aussies that can kind of run around and hit some, almost sometimes they're hitting balls that they're bad. They're so good. They're so short. They're good. They end up rolling and so forth. I just think the NFL schemes and the players are just too fast in the NFL to do stuff like that. And um, um, it's exciting now that the kickers and the punters are going to get broken in footballs. It's going to be huge.
Yeah. And I won't go down we don't have time to do this, and I won't go down the rabbit hole with back in the day, you with the whole deflating the balls and that whole situation. We don't have time to go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, when you talk about traveling in the air and the balls out of the bag, that just made me think of all that. So
Go to a high school game on a Friday night and grab a quarterback ball, and most kickers, unfortunately in high school, you only really get a broken, you get one ball to kick off during the game. You're kicking with quarterback balls. And a lot of times these quarterbacks in high school are throwing like 13, 12, 13 is like normal PSI. They're probably having like 9.5, 10.
Wow. Okay.
So for a kicker, we're like, no, we don't want 9.5 or 10 because if you impact a football at 9.5, your foot is like the ball's wrapping around your foot. There's no recoil. So, you know, even in college, like that's why you see guys kind of like struggle in college because some of these balls, like they're going to companies and they're getting the balls custom made to the quarterback's hands. And then they have to throw an NFL ball and these guys are struggling. They're playing with pee-wee size footballs in some places.
Wow.
So it's like those Nerf balls as a kid, you're like, I could be quarterback because you could throw that Nerf ball like 70 yards. And then you grow up a regular football and you're like, I think that's why you see a lot of these guys in college that come to the NFL as quarterbacks. I'm not a quarterback coach, but a lot of these guys struggle because the ball it's a grown man size football. And a lot of these guys can't spin it. And so for kickers, it's almost better. They get better as they go to the NFL because the sweet spot's bigger on the ball. I never forget the punter that I have for the Falcons, Bradley Pinion, when he got drafted by the 49ers, they basically were like, we didn't think you could kick off. And he was hitting balls in college like 5 deep that were super small. And then he worked out for the 49ers and he was hitting 3-step kickoffs out of the back of the end zone. They're like, wow, you've gotten so much better. And we're like, no, the balls just stunk. So college
Uh,
obviously is made all around the quarterbacks and they get some of these small girth footballs that not a lot of people know. Back in the day, there was a game called lawn darts. It's basically like cornhole with spiked darts you played in the backyard. It was so
yeah.
dangerous, so dangerous. Someone needs to bring lawn darts back, but
Okay.
that's how the footballs are. They're designed to basically spiral and turn over. So these guys are throwing them like a metric mile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I would, where can people find you, Dan, and how do kickers and punters who might be listening to this in the future get involved in, yeah, where can they find you?
Yeah, so social media on Instagram pretty heavily. Dan Orner Kicking, obviously on Twitter at Dan Orner Kicking. And I've been in the Carolinas for 20 years and no plans on leaving, especially with my guys here now at the Panthers. And I obviously look forward to seeing some games this year. And but I'm in South Charlotte, always been in Myers Park, in South Park area. Typically start working with kids 12 years in age. And, my model is really kind of the cradle to the grave. When guys start out, I want to be their coach and help them create a great foundation. And then when guys retire, 15 years in the NFL, I want to be at their retirement parties. So,
Yeah. I would be remiss if I did not end on this. How was it being coached by with Nick Saban there at Michigan State when he was there, and now and then part two with North Carolina since you did go there. What do you think with Bill Belichick and how that's going to work out? How's he going to do at Carolina?
well, Coach Saban obviously was just ahead of his time. The amount of attention to detail. I mean, that is the attention to detail that he demanded of us basically day one as freshmen. It's the reason why he's won every place. Like we were a number two team in the country at Michigan State when he was there, and the I think the difference was practice was insanely hard. Obviously, not for a kicker or punter, but the difference that I remember a lot of the players saying was that like when they went to the games, they just went with so much confidence that they basically were like, it wasn't like if we were going to win, it was we were going to win by how much. And I think that the confidence that he exuded in players and the level that respect that he demanded of players, I do think he changed a lot of folks' life for the better. And I think that the college game is changing without a doubt. It's starting to look more like the NFL. And I would say in the next 2 years, more NFL. The reason why a lot of NFL coaches have not come to college is because historically college coaches have to go on the road and recruit. And they're on the road not seeing their families. And they're on the road in multitudes of time in the year. They're on the road during the season. They're flying places, they're driving places. Sometimes in Charlotte, especially, coaches in the ACC, they'll see two games on a Friday night. They'll go to a half at Myers Park and then drive down the road to Marvin Ridge or Providence Day to see two games in a night, and then drive 3 hours home to see their families, and then get up the next day to be on the field. And so the college schedule for a college coach, and partly the reason why I never got into actually working with colleges, is that these guys were really working 365. But the NFL is
Yeah.
changing. I mean, you're going to see a lot more college coaches that are former NFL coaches, because it's going to be set up like the NFL. There's going to be a scouting department. There's going to be guys that all they do is recruit and scout, and there's going to be GMs, and just like the
You're already
NFL,
seeing that guys getting hired back into college as general managers. That's where it's going.
it is 100% going to be the NFL. And I bet that in the next 5 years, college kids are going to have the choice whether they want to go to school or just play football, or do both, get a degree or do both. And I think obviously a lot of people are complaining. I'm kind of a free market guy. I think if boosters and alumni are stupid enough to give 20-year-old kids that really haven't developed yet hundreds of thousands of dollars, then I think that these kids should take advantage of it. And but my mindset is really just adapt and evolve with the game. You can complain about it, or you adapt and evolve like the NFL has, and it becomes free agency. So I think guys like Belichick, they're gonna flourish because they're really good delegators. That's
Yeah.
what makes these guys great. They bring in guys that are experts in a specific niche, and these guys know how to delegate. So guys like Belichick, that's why these guys are always going to win.
Yeah.
They just are. So the tough thing is obviously just finding the right players that believe in the sauce that you're cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good place to end it. Dan Orner has been my guest today here on Inside the Vault, the Carolina Panthers podcast. Dan, all the best to you as you continue coaching up and training these guys who are the future of the league, some presently in the league, and obviously those who have already come and gone that you've been able to have an impact on. Keep doing what you're doing. There are a lot of fans of you out there and guys like you who are doing such a good job with these young men and women who are able to be in this space. So thank you again for coming on, Dan. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that'll wrap up this episode of Inside the Vault, a Carolina Panthers podcast, episode number 70. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.